My name is Dalen, and today I'm going to be discussing feminist theology for my God and the Human Experience course. In 1983, Rosemary Radford Ruther authored Sexism and God Talk, in which she addresses patriarchal theology and seeks alternative traditions that challenge man-centric bias in religion. Ruther juxtaposes patriarchal theology with the term feminist theology, promoting the full humanity of women. The principle in male theology proposes the notion that males are the norm, thus suggesting that women are associated with sin and neglected in humanity. Ruther draws from the following 5 areas of cultural tradition: Old and New Testaments, marginalized Christian traditions such as Nazism and Quakerism, themes of classical Christian theology such as Catholicism and Protestants, non-Christian philosophy, and lastly, post-Christian social movements. She concludes that all of the following traditions evaluated are sexist and must be subjected to feminist critique in order to form an alternative to the relationship of gender and God. The Hebrew and Christian Old Testament begins with Genesis, which portrays the woman as a temptress, causing the man to fall from grace. Imagery such as Adam and Eve in the book of Genesis place women in a position of inferiority and subjugation, thus associating men with freedom and dominance. Ruther critiques and challenges the notion that women are the gateway to the devil through the development of the term ecofeminism. She concludes that early biblical notions that portray women alongside the devil led to the enslavement of women and of pollution created for the benefit of men. Ecofeminism strives to encourage men and women to work alongside one another to sustain the shared planet. The feminist critique reveals that women are explained to be the cause of evil. Apostle Paul and St. Augustine of the Christian Ordinance blame Eve for the original sin, which created a good human in contrast to the other less human. Ecofeminism challenges this social phenomena by aiming to promote men and women as equivalent to prevent the exploitation of nature. Another key point of sexism and God talk is the images of God that vary amongst various religious traditions. In the Christian perspective, God is seen as a male, which justifies patriarchy. Ruther highlights the images of women and godliness between the Old and New Testament and concludes that the New Testament consists of notions of God that can lead to a community of equals. She alludes that the Old Testament refers to God as the liberator of oppressed people. Thus, metaphorically, viewing God as a father is translated in parent language, as fathers are liberators and mothers are redeemers. In contrast, religions of the Near East display images of mother goddesses, in which male gods are equivalent as opposed to complementary images. Ruther uses the word goddess as a means of overcoming patriarchy, similar to the current pop culture reference of artist Ariana Grande and her song God is a Woman. It is important to note that Ruther is not patronizing God, as she believes that God allows for the transformation of community and nature and is a source of creation. Feminist theology deconstructs religious images that stratify the relationship of men and women that have been implemented amongst our social order. The inferiority of women is conceptualized across the globe. It is not a Western or Middle Eastern concern. While the majority of the book is analyzed from a Christianized perspective, Ruther uses the feminist critique to deconstruct patriarchy and various theological traditions. In addition to analyzing the portrayal of women across different denominations, Ruther draws a parallel between the historical implications of women that derived as a result of theology and the societal view of women at the time of the text. In the various examples throughout sexism and God talk, it is clear how religious traditions impacted the power dynamic of men and women in the world as we know it. On the other hand, Ruther fails to analyze feminist theology from an intersectional framework. Although there is a clearly evident argument for the establishment of gender-based power dynamics from a religious context, there isn't an explanation of the effects of theology on gender and ethnicity. Secondly, the effects of patriarchal theology explain the role of women in the familial structure. The feminist critique could be utilized in explaining the lack of support of same-sex families, though Ruther provides an inadequate explanation for the relationship of gender, sexuality, and religion. For example, Christian social organizations, such as the Promise Keepers, advocate for the role of a man as the head of a home and oppose same-sex marriages. While sexism and God talk promotes feminist theology, it is not clear if the ideology challenges sexuality as it is mentioned in Christianity. Lastly, the relationship of religion and gender is used in politics to limit the reproductive rights of women. The feminist critique could be used to explain the origins of commodifying women's bodies and reproductive justice. Feminist theology addresses the origins of women oppression in society by dismantling scriptures and traditions of religious practices. Ruther provides a feminist critique that allows for the synthesis of religious attitudes that have cultivated human relationships as we know it. On the contrary, there's a lack of discussion regarding the repercussions of patriarchal theology on the political control of maintaining male dominance.